Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
Yeah, welcome into another edition of Operation Domination. It is our weekly look at the injury situation around the league in advance of Week 7. I am not Dan Mater. You may have noticed that. If you caught the Week 7 preview episode of Operation Domination, you know that Dan is gallivanting on the beach down in the Dominican Republic with the wife. He's soaking up the sun, hopefully some sun down there. Hopefully it looks better than it does up here in the North Woods of Wisconsin, where we had rain and cold all day. But I am instead Chase Thornton, coming to you from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar. I want to remind you to make sure you download the show on your favorite podcast app. You can find us anywhere just by searching Operation Domination Football. You can check out all of our video content, as well as that of your other favorite FFAN personalities on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. No Dan this week, but I am not alone. As you can see here, you know our guest, as always, for this show from the Injured List podcast, and here to tell us about all things sports injury related, it's Dr. Brian Scott. Brian, how we doing there, man?
We're doing good, Chase. It's nice to hang out with you again. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while. We didn't get to see each other at the expo this year like we have, and then I haven't been on one of these episodes for quite a while with you. So yeah. Good to see you again. You know, I missed you, but had a big week last week for your New York Giants. What's your guess this week here against a much tougher defense, at least in terms of how they've performed this year in Denver?
Yeah. It's going to be tough, but I like what they're doing. I like what's happening right now. I'm still not necessarily on board with my coaches, but I like what Jackson Dart has brought to the table. The team seems to have been rallying around him, and I do appreciate that. There seems to be an extra sense of excitement in the locker room and in the fandom. So I am excited to see what holds true for the rest of the season here. But it's an exciting time. We're seeing a transitioning of the guard, so to speak, in New York when it comes to the quarterback position, and it's been sorely missed since Eli retired. So hopefully,
sure enough, yep.
bigger, better things to come.
No, Dart, I'll tell you what, he has been winning me over in terms of his fantasy prospects here.
He's got good moxie, and that's what it takes to play in New York. You got to have some moxie.
Right. He's going to have to be, when you're dealing with the New York media market as well. So, all right. Well, we might as well just jump right into it because it's not, the injuries aren't going away, and we've got to talk about them. We got to get people ready here for this week. And we'll start, as always, at the quarterback position here. Now, we've got only 2 teams on bye this week, but, it's a couple of big teams. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are out because the Ravens and the Bills are on bye. Yeah. We are in full bye week mode, and so, like, these injuries, we've got to know how to navigate them. And no better place to start, I guess, than a place that has had an interesting injury situation at their quarterback position all year long. And San Francisco, Dan's favorite team, we start him off real sad here on the show. Brock Purdy, he's been limited with a toe injury. He's only played 2 games this year, week 1 and week 4. In his stead, Mac Jones has been filling in and played very, very well, actually, all things considered, even though he has been kind of banged up himself with a knee and an oblique injury. What can you tell us there about the San Francisco quarterback situation as they get prepared to take on the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday Night Football?
Well, the plan hasn't changed. In the last several weeks, Dan and I have been talking about this. They're basically going with the least injured of the 2 and giving Brock Purdy time to get fully recovered from this turf toe variant, as they've been calling it. Not a true turf toe injury. If it was, he probably would have been sidelined with season-ending surgery. So what we're seeing here is them choosing to go with the least They're holding out the least injured guy in hopes that he'll get better sooner. So, and it really is, pick one of your 2 poisons here. Brock Purdy with that turf toe, that's just unfortunately an injury that has to be rested. You cannot play through that. It will just continue to linger. They should have probably not brought him back when they did originally, but they made that mistake. Mac Jones was injured at the time too. He's never been 100% healthy. So they're going with Mac Jones to try and just buy some time with Brock Purdy. And I've said this the last few weeks. So long as Mac Jones doesn't lose a limb, he'll be out there to start until Brock Purdy's fully ready to go. Now he's back to practice. I think he had a limited practice yesterday and today.
Yep.
But I still don't necessarily think we're going to see him this week. I think it may still be another week. And you mentioned bye weeks. You've only got 2 teams on bye, which bodes well for Lamar Jackson because I think we'll see him back next week. I've been saying that they're going to hold him out to the bye. Unfortunately, the 49ers don't have that luxury. Their bye is not till like week 14, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like that is not even anywhere near a sight line, so they can't use that to their advantage, and that's not going to help them, unfortunately. So they're just literally limping week to week here.
Yeah, Mac Jones has been a warrior. I mean, he's been out there, I mean, laying on the ground after every play. It seems like he gets hit on every play, and every play he looks like he's in just complete agony. And then he gets up and he whips another one at somebody. And I mean, with their injury situation and their wide receivers and George Kittle being out and they've, with everybody else that's missed time on that team, he keeps coming out there and keeps marching ahead. Now, he's been quarterback 8, quarterback 17, quarterback 10, quarterback 22 in the 4 weeks that he's played. So like I said, he's played pretty well for you, kind of giving you an every other week situation there, but he's 3-1 as a starter. And yeah, they were both listed as limited in practice, but Purdy is more limited is how they officially, somebody put it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you. It looks like it's going to be Mac Jones again, as long as he can kind of walk or hop on one foot there. It looks like he is trending to start there. It's a tough matchup this week with Atlanta. Atlanta's only given up the 28th most points to opposing fantasy quarterbacks there. And with the uncertainty, I mean, they might be getting George Kittle back this week. We'll talk about him in a little bit here, but yeah, I don't have a whole ton of high hopes for either one of these guys. If they play, whoever plays this week, it does look like it'll be Jones, but I have him down in the mid 20s for a ranking. I believe in ECR, he is the quarterback 25 ECR in the week as it is anyway. So either way, I mean, it's been a rough season there in San Francisco in terms of what we wanted to see from them from a fantasy standpoint, but looking like we're going to have Mac Jones there. Now let's stay in the NFC West and let's move a little bit south to Arizona facing my Green Bay Packers this weekend. And Kyler Murray, limited with a foot injury. Looks like he's going to play, but what do you have for us on Kyler Murray, an update there and what his outlook is?
Well, he was limited last week too, a little bit later in the week, and then it turned out that they decided not to play him and sit him out. It didn't sound like it was a serious injury. There was not really any specific moment where anyone could identify when he got hurt. They called it a foot sprain. They weren't very specific in what type of sprain to the foot it was. Either way, when the initial news came out, it didn't sound like a serious injury. They wanted to get him some rest. They did that last week. I think we're going to see him go. I don't think they can afford to not have him in the lineup, unfortunately. Was it Jacoby Brissett, I think, was their backup this past weekend, and did an admirable job. But Kyler Murray brings a little bit different element to the Cardinals that you just can't get with most other quarterbacks because of his mobility. I think we're going to see him. They're saying day-to-day. It's probably going to be day-to-day, but most reports that have come out this week have hinted at the fact that he's most likely going to be in the lineup. And I think that will hold true.
Yeah, Kyler, he's been a frustrating one this year too. I mean, you draft him because you want him and you want that mobility that you talked about. And I believe Dan said last week, he hasn't run as much as we kind of wanted him to, or he kind of let on that he might run this year. But when he has run, he's been effective. He just hasn't been very effective passing the football. You mentioned Jacoby Brissett coming in last week. He threw for over 300. He threw for 320 yards and a pair of touchdowns. He was quarterback 7 on the week. It was by far the best fantasy week that we've seen at the quarterback position for the Cardinals this season. Better than anything Kyler's put out there on tape so far. in terms of his passing, Murray just has not been effective this season outside of, you or I could throw the ball to Trey McBride, I think, which is awesome. I love Trey McBride. Yeah. He's one of my favorite players in the league, regardless of position. And I think he's going to be fine no matter who's out there chucking the rock. But, in terms of, Marvin Harrison, who we'll bring up a little bit later too, and the rest of that team, Jacoby Brissett, he's always been one of those guys where when he plays, he's just solid. I call him a professional football player. He's a professional in every sense of the word. He's ready every week when you need him, and he plays his position. He plays his backup role really, really well. And when you need him in the lineup, he comes in and he produces. It was a hard fought game last week, but like I said, in terms of fantasy wise, we got a lot out of Jacoby Brissett. But Kyler Murray, being able to run the football, it would be really nice to be able to see him out there and jogging around and slinging that thing, whether he's wearing his, footy pajama uniform or whatever else. But he's playing against the Green Bay team that has been kind of middle of the road against the pass. 17th most points to the quarterback position there. But it's also a team that traditionally, trust me, I know, because I watch them every flipping week. It's always been a team that has struggled with the more mobile guys at quarterback. They always seem to struggle to contain those guys and keep them in. And if he can get outside, like I said, the one place Green Bay has been actually very vulnerable has been that tight end position. And when you're facing the best of the best in Trey McBride, and we know that Kyler Murray can at least find McBride, I think that's where your fantasy juice is in this game. Coming into this game against the Packers, there would be, Murray finding McBride. I'm not big on Kyler Murray this week. I'm not big on either him or Brissett, no matter who plays. I think Brissett probably passes a little better, passes a little more, but I think your overall fantasy ceiling is probably bigger with Murray, just betting on him, catching lightning in a bottle passing wise, and then hopefully maybe running one or two in for you. If you're leaning on him still to this point, hopefully you've pivoted and gone in a Danny Dimes direction or something else, but Kyler Murray looking like he'll play this week. So let's move up to, speaking of the NFC North and my Packers, let's look at their, rivals in the division and the Minnesota Vikings here with JJ McCarthy, who's been limited with an ankle injury and missed a bunch of time with that. Pair of touchdowns passing and a rushing touchdown in the opening win against Chicago. And then Atlanta kind of took him apart and he hasn't played since. What's it looking like for JJ McCarthy here? What do you got for an update on that?
Yeah, that all happened under kind of mysterious circumstances. Nobody really even knew he got hurt until after weekend ended. And then all of a sudden they were saying, oh, he's out. And he's going to be out for a while. And to the bench he went, to the medical tent he went, and we haven't seen him since. So they called it a high ankle sprain. The timing is about right for a high ankle sprain. They're still saying he's not 100%. Yep. So even though we're seeing him back in a limited practice mode, it doesn't sound like they're optimistic he's going to be available this weekend. And even if he is, not so sure we're going to see him just yet with Wentz back there. Now, you had mentioned earlier Wentz was dealing with his own little shoulder issue. I'm not so sure that's serious enough to keep him out and put McCarthy in just yet if he's not 100%. So this could be at least another week with McCarthy before we see him get any meaningful action in practice or games.
Yeah, that'll bum out my little guy. My 6-year-old is a big Viking fan, which makes for an interesting time on Sundays around our house. But Carson Wentz, had a bit of a shoulder issue going on earlier this week, but he practiced in full today. He should be good to go there. And he's been 2-1 as a starter. And while McCarthy's been out, remember they are past their bye week now as well. So whichever one of them plays, you've at least got that guy you can lean on as we get into the heart of our bye weeks here. But Wentz done an admirable job. Like I said, 2-1 of the starter. He's kept JJ, fantasy relevant. Justin Jefferson there. Jefferson doesn't have any touchdowns yet with him, but he does have back-to-back games of over 11 targets and over 120 yards receiving. So, he's been able to maintain that. And they're facing the Philadelphia Eagles, who you guys just knocked off last week. And Philadelphia, defensively, they, again, like I just said with Green Bay, they've been very middle of the road against opposing quarterbacks, opposing pass games in general. They've given up the 15th most points to opposing fantasy quarterbacks there. Again, like you said, McCarthy looks like he's going to miss at least another week here. So I would expect to see Wentz in there. With Wentz in there, You're going to see the same thing that we kind of always see from Carson Wentz, where he's not really, doesn't seem like he's got the entire picture in front of him, but he's good enough to at least get the ball to his top weapons, which in this case, like we said, is Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison is also back out there and running around and giving him another kind of high profile target there. So Carson Wentz, right now he's listed as a quarterback 29 in ECR for the week in terms of rankings, but they've also got JJ McCarthy ranked as a quarterback 32 ECR, because I think there was some question, like I said earlier in the week, about which one we'd see. Carson Wentz, I would put somewhere around probably quarterback 20 here for heading into this week, facing an Eagles team that's sure to be out for revenge. So that looks like that's going to do it for our quarterback discussion. Let's move on to the running back position, where you and I kind of joked around or laughed about it a little bit before we came on air here, that running back position, we don't have a whole lot to talk about this week, because it seems like every time we've had to talk about a running back injury this year, it's been catastrophic, devastating, and it's knocking a guy out for the rest of the season. But the two we are going to talk about here, we're going to go to the NFC South. We're going to talk about first Bucky Irving down in Tampa Bay. He's been out for a while here now with a foot ankle issue there.
Don't forget the shoulder
and the shoulder as well, right? Like you'd think
later on, which was weird too, because that kind of popped up after the whole foot issue popped up. So
yeah, after he found himself on the report initially with the whole foot thing, all of a sudden, oh yeah, by the way, he's dealing with injuries up and down.
What's been surprising about him is, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's not even, they didn't place him on IR, but yet here we are moving into like week 3 or 4 of this injury now. It's been quite a while, and
with no end in sight.
Right, and there's a lot of reports coming out this week saying he's not going to be ready. I don't think he's even practiced again yet.
No, he has not practiced yet.
I mean, this looks like it's going to be an extended period of time here. How long? Nobody really seems to know. There's not any real light at the end of the tunnel, unfortunately, for him.
Yeah, and that's a bummer. I mean, I love Bucky. I jumped on his bandwagon hardcore last year. I had him all over the place in Dynasty anyway, but he still ranks 8th in half PPR points per game here with 15.6. I mean, he was having a great year over the first month of the season or so, but then in his stead, and it looks like we're going to see it again this week, we're going to get Rachaad White, who has back-to-back weeks here in week 5 and week 6 of top 10 running back finishes, playing in place of that injured Bucky Irving there. And this week, a Monday night showdown at Detroit. It's got one of the highest over-unders that game, 52.5 points as of the last time I looked at it of the week there. So there should be a bunch of points to be had. Now, Detroit has been, pretty stingy against actually opposing running backs, 28th in the league in terms of how many points they've given up. So, fifth from the top in terms of the fewest points allowed to opposing running backs there. But, Rachaad White, he looks like the guy. He's ranked RB 15 on the week, ECR wise, and he's got back-to-back weeks, as I said, not only in the top 10 in terms of fantasy scoring, but he's been in the top 9 in terms of running back snap percentage. I mean, he is seeing the work down there. It has not been, I know a lot of people speculatively added Sean Tucker in. Well, he's had 12 total touches here over the last 2 weeks. He did have a touchdown last week in that 49er game, but it is the Rachaad White show. So if you have White, lean on him again, feel comfortable and confident about that, even though Detroit's been rough on opposing running backs. White is the only one who's gonna see anything in that game in terms of passes out of the backfield for Baker Mayfield. So fire up Rachaad White, feel good about it. He should give you at least running back 2 numbers, I would think. And so then the other running back situation we want to talk about there in an NFC South is going to be in Carolina with Chuba Hubbard. He's still limited, it said, with that calf injury. But what does it look like in terms of his prospects this week as Carolina gets set to head north and face the Jets?
It's kind of funny, man. Carolina, the Panthers. I live in Carolina now. It's where what we call home. So it's like I kind of follow my Giants, and I'm passionate about them. I don't really pay attention to the Panthers, but when I do, it seems to be some type of hilarious misstep on their part or something that they've done to ruin a season. Surprisingly, this year they're actually playing fairly well.
Yeah.
Rico Dowdle filled in for Chuba Hubbard and had like 2 amazing weeks back to back. So now the Panthers are toying with the idea of keeping him their number 1, or now they're saying in some reports here locally that they might split action between Chuba and Rico, who they say Chuba should be coming back. They say he's well rested. They were originally, when he went down with his calf injury, it didn't sound like he was going to be out maybe more than a week. But then Rico Dowdle steps in and does an amazing job. And then they said, okay, maybe we'll give him a little bit more time to rest and get
kind of a luxury. Yeah, gave him a luxury of being able to wait a little bit.
Right. So here we are now. We're like, this is like the third week here heading into this injury designation. And some reports down here are saying that Chuba is going to be ready to go. And the coaching staff is talking about maybe getting a shared workload with Rico Dowdle. So I think he should be ready. From an injury standpoint, he should be ready to go. There was no concern that this was a serious calf injury. They did not mention his Achilles at any point in time in any of these reports. It sounds like it was a muscular strain of the calf, which can be uncomfortable, but it didn't even sound serious at the beginning. There was some talk that he wasn't even going to miss any time initially.
Right.
So I can't imagine that he's not made a near complete recovery and should be available. The question is whether or not they're going to use him.
Right. And that's the thing is there's fantasy managers have been just thrilled with the awesome pickup that Rico Dowdle has been in his place. You mentioned that. I mean, he was running back 2 last week. He was running back 1 the week before that in week 5. So back-to-back weeks in the top 2. He's given you 473 total yards, 2 touchdowns in these last 2 weeks, almost 63 half PPR points over 2 weeks there. Just been an absolute monster. And he's ranked as the running back 14 this week. Again, Chuba's ranked as running back 46, I think, because of that speculation that they may or may not use him as much, or they may try to kind of ease him back in. I don't think Dowdle takes this game. I've been very vocal about this. I said it on last night's show, and I'm going to say it again here. I don't think that Dowdle takes over the number 1 or the 1A role from Chuba. They like Chuba. Chuba's one of their team leaders, I think, in that locker room. They just signed him to an extension. They want him there. They want to keep him happy. Dowdle's only on that 1-year contract, but it might be a nice opportunity for them to showcase Dowdle. I mean, depending on what they think, there are some teams that are in the market for a running back. And, I mean, I don't know that you want to give up Dowdle if it looks like there's any chance of competing this season, but, they may not be opposed to at least listening to offers, considering what Dowdle's given them. I know that, from a fantasy standpoint, we talked about it last night on the show, that if you can pass off Dowdle right now, if you want to try and trade him right now, you're never going to get more for him than you're going to get probably right now, because people have seen what he's done these last 2 weeks, and there is Dowdle fever all over the place. People are all about Rico Suave right now. He's been awesome. Carolina, this week, facing, like I said, the Jets. Now the Jets, again, middle of the road against opposing running backs, 16th most fantasy points to the position there. But with what Rico's given you the last couple of weeks, I mean, now again, you got to caveat that with he was facing 2 of the worst rushing defenses in the entire league in terms of the Dolphins and in terms of the Cowboys. The Cowboy game, obviously, last week was a bit of a revenge game after they kind of unceremoniously dumped him out the door after what he gave them, 1,000-yard season a year ago. But Rico, I think, for this week is probably your better bet, even if Chuba does play. I would not be surprised, however, if Hubbard does play this week, and if he does play and comes out of it healthy. Like I said, I would expect to see Chuba regain the 1A role, but I think Rico has done enough to earn himself quite a role going forward, much more than I think they were probably planning on when they brought him in this season. So with that, let's move on to the wide receiver position, and one that bums out a ton of people, myself included, as we're going to talk about the number 1 overall wide receiver in fantasy, Puka Nacua in Los Angeles for the Rams there. He's your league leader in targets. He's your league leader in receptions. He's still second in yards, even after, a rough game last week where he came back in, and then, Willie won't he. But Puka Nacua, what do you got for us on his ankle? He did not practice today, but what do you got for us on his ankle?
Yeah, well, it's kind of surprising. I watched the replays of him getting hurt, or at least when they suspected that he got hurt. And it was actually a couple of plays before the one play in the end zone where he landed on the opposing player, because it was the opposite side. So it was interesting to see that. It was hard to really even tell what the mechanism was of that injury. And when he had that play in the end zone, he came up limping and was walked into the locker room, came back out the second half and tried to go. Apparently only took like 2 snaps or 2 series, and then that was it. So it must have been more significant than we realized, and now he's considered day-to-day with an ankle sprain. It sounds like most reports expect that he will, if not be limited, then miss this weekend. And part of that reason is because Tutu Atwell is also dealing with an injury. He's got a hamstring issue, which has limited him in practice, even though the coaching staff seemed to be optimistic he would be available to go this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm not overly confident when it comes to hamstrings on guys that cannot get multiple full sessions. And we've talked about this before, Chase, with you and Dan on the show. The re-injury rates for hamstrings are very high initially when you step back out on the field for the first couple of weeks coming back from this injury. So you really have to treat them with kid gloves and take them back very slowly. And so, until I see him get a full session in, I'm not very optimistic that he'll A, play, and B, if he does, get through a full game without re-aggravating that thing or being as competitive as he would be if he was healthy. So,
yeah, and for a guy like Tutu, who is not large and has to rely on his speed, on his explosivity to be able to be fantasy relevant, not just, playing the game, but be fantasy relevant, especially, and he hasn't been really a factor, outside of the 88-yard touchdown catch. I believe it was his only catch that week in week 4. He hasn't really been all that fantasy relevant. He's kind of a roster clogger in Dynasty. If you've had him, he's never really been more than a desperation pickup, mid-year pickup. But if you're going to be missing Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, at least he knows the offense. He can be out there. He can give you something, something if he can be out there. But I agree with you. When it comes to hamstrings, and when it comes to a guy that needs to be explosive and a hamstring injury, explosive movements are what tend to, tweak that thing or re-injure that thing in my, experience. But in there, in his absence or possible absence, and in Puka Nacua's absence, we do have Davante Adams to fall back on. Now, chances are if you had Nacua, you don't have Davante Adams. But if you do have Adams, you're happy right now because it means that he's jumped up into instant top 10 type play. In fact, he's ranked wide receiver 4 this week, ECR wise. He's a wide receiver 13 overall on the season. Davante Adams, we know what kind of route runner he is. We know, what kind of damage he can do on the field. He seems like he's getting more and more comfortable with Matthew Stafford, which only makes sense. A couple of seasoned professional vets like that. I would suspect, too, that we might see a little bit more Jordan Whittington. Remember, Jordan Whittington has had some fleeting flashes and moments of fantasy relevance last season when he had to fill in there and, see a little bit more playing time than he normally does. So I would guess that if we don't see, looks like we're not going to see Nacua. If we don't see Tutu Atwell, even if we do, I would see Atwell as probably being very limited in his usage in that game. We know it's going to be a Davante Adams type game. I would expect to see maybe a little more Jordan Whittington. I wouldn't be excited about either Atwell or Whittington. I wouldn't be relying on either of them except in absolute desperation mode here for the week. The Rams, going up here against the Jacksonville Jaguars in London, I believe it's a London game. It's a Europe game, Sunday morning, 8:30 Central Time. So keep that in mind when you're setting your lineups for this weekend, guys. If you are watching these injury situations, especially for the Rams or for the Jaguars, you do have that Sunday morning game, so you're going to have to get up early and check that. But Jacksonville here gives up a ton of points in the pass game. So Davante Adams makes a nice play. If you want to try and sneak one of those other guys in there, Atwell if he plays, or Whittington, Jacksonville gives up the 8th most points to that position. So, there are probably worse dart throws, I guess, to take, but we should be wheels up here for Mr. Davante Adams. So let's again stay in the NFC West there. Let's move to Arizona. We talked about earlier about Kyler Murray and his prospects, but we've got Marvin Harrison Jr., who has been in concussion protocol, has been limited with that there. He's your wide receiver 30 overall on the season, but what's it look like for getting Marvin Harrison back in our lineups this weekend?
Well, he is making progress. He was a limited participant in practice this week and was wearing a yellow no contact jersey, according to some reports, which means he's still in concussion protocol. He's working through that. Unfortunately, until we see him progress, he's not going to get cleared. So
Right.
The later you get into the week, the less they do, the less chance of getting cleared, because usually Friday, Saturday is just walkthrough stuff, not a lot of contact or any type of drills at practice that are meaningful as far as getting off the concussion protocol. So as long as he's been able to get through what he's done so far, symptom-free, then he's making progress. But again, the later you get in the week, the less likely he'll get cleared and come off the protocol, which means he'll be out. So this is one of those situations where you got to watch every day throughout the week to see what he does. And then even then, you might not get cleared until game day. So this could be one of those true, wait Sunday morning, look at the rosters and see what the status is of Marvin Harrison Jr. before putting him in your lineup.
Yeah, and again, a guy who's been frustrating for fantasy managers here who have him. I mean, look, we saw him in week 1. He went out there and popped off 15.6 half PPR points, caught 5 out of 6 targets, got a touchdown, looked like, hey, we might have something here. And then he went out and gave you 2 back-to-back duds. Came out against Seattle, had another nice usable game, came out against Tennessee and only caught 4 passes, but for 98 yards. And then last week, like we said, he had 2 catches on 2 targets for 32 yards before the concussion popped up and gave him a problem here against the Colts. But he's kind of been, it's been a boomer bust type season for Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, they are also dealing with injuries to Michael Wilson, who has been dealing with a foot issue, but he has practiced in full. Looks like he should be able to play, which would be big for them, especially if Harrison can't go. Because Zay Jones is also dealing with a knee injury and did not practice today either. So we are talking about their top 3 of their top 4 wide receivers, all dealing with some kind of injury issue. You might be down to Greg Dortch, hopefully Michael Wilson. To me, that means it's just, again, more wheels up on my guy, Trey McBride. He is your tight end 1 on the week, ECR wise, as if he isn't always, wheels up kind of guy at that position. I said leads in tight end targets. He's 2nd in receptions. He's 2nd in tight end yardage. He's already matched last season's receiving touchdown total with 2. And especially if they are missing Marvin Harrison, I think they're going to be all over Trey McBride, especially against this Packer team that, as I mentioned before, gives up the 4th most points to fantasy tight ends. So keep an eye on the Marvin Harrison Jr. Situation this week. They do play one of the late Sunday afternoon games, so you might have to make a decision on him before you really want to. But as you said, if he can't clear concussion protocol, it's all going to be a moot point anyway. So let's move on to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's got, this is a veritable smorgasbord of injury, discussion here in terms of their wide receiver core. We've got Emeka Egbuka dealing with a hamstring injury. We've got Mike Evans, who has been dealing with a hamstring injury. We've got Chris Godwin, who has been, injured all over the place and re-injured and then back on the field and then re-injured again. So what do you make, or what do you have to tell us about this entire wide receiver room down here in Tampa Bay between Egbuka, Evans, and Godwin here?
Well, it seems like it's 49ers and Tampa Bay Bucks every week that we're really focusing on. So, but yeah, it's unfortunate for Egbuka. He's been having a great breakout season as a rookie here. He's been tremendous. And showing some good chemistry with Baker Mayfield. He left the game in week 6 with this hamstring injury and did not come back, and that's concerning. It basically rules him out for week 7. I'd be shocked to see if number 1, if he's even practiced. I don't think he has, and if he did,
he didn't today, as far as I can see. Yeah,
and even if he did, I'd be shocked if they threw him back out there. Now, Mike Evans has been working his way back from a hamstring issue, and he's dealt with stuff like this for the last few years throughout his career, but he's getting up there in age, skilled position player, plus 30 years old. These things take a lot longer. You definitely don't want to rush a guy like Mike Evans back. However, he's been working his way back, and so it sounds like his timeline might be moved up a little quicker this week. So I do expect that he'll be playing. He's going to probably carry a questionable tag throughout the week.
Yep.
He may or may not get a full session in. But, at his age, being in the league as long as he has, being as productive as he has, this might be the one occasion where you might not necessarily need to get him on a full practice before getting back from this hamstring injury, and you might not see that happen. And then, throw in the whole Chris Godwin issue. I think that just accelerates Mike Evans' timeline even more.
Yeah.
And what's going on with him is really kind of unfortunate, but also a little bit surprising. He had 2 procedures on that ankle after he had a fractured fibula. The second procedure, by most reports, was to remove some hardware, which it sounds like may have been bothering him, that it wasn't a complication per se. And that happened quite a while ago. It's been well, documented that was like back in the winter, I think, like over February break or something. And then he made his way back and was playing, and then all of a sudden came off limping one day. They didn't even know what happened. The team hasn't even identified when he got hurt, just that he came off limping, was complaining of pain. And now he has an injury to the same fibula that he fractured. However, they're saying in a different spot, which is concerning because essentially that's a whole new injury. And if he has hardware in there, if it's even though it might directly not be related to the surgery he had before or the injury he had before, it could be a consequence of that. So you have to wonder if maybe he developed a stress fracture or something. He's not practicing. They're saying he's week to week. I don't think we're going to see him for multiple weeks now. But it's unfortunate.
And frustrating too. I mean, we all know the kind of season he was putting together last year before the injury. I mean, he was just shooting the lights out, over 16 half PPR points a game. It was just an absolute juggernaut, 5 touchdowns in just over 6 games played there last season. And when we finally got him back in week 4, I mean, he saw 10 targets right off the bat. Now he only caught 3 of them, but 10 targets right off the bat. It looked like, hey, heck yeah, here we go. Let's fire it up for Chris Godwin again, especially with Evans being out. And now, like you said, it looks like he's going to be missing more time, which is really frustrating for him. In terms of Evans, yeah, he did return to practice here. He has missed the last 3 games there, but he is ranked as the wide receiver 32 ECR this week. So it does seem like everybody kind of expects him to play there, and they're going to need him without Ibuka, without Godwin there, and especially with what Ibuka had been giving them. He's been their top wide receiver this year with all the injuries that they've had. I mean, we kind of were a little bummed to see him go to Tampa Bay in terms of, what we thought his usage might be, because they already had Jalen McMillan, who kind of, had a nice emergence last season. They already had Evans. We knew Godwin would be back at some point. Well, then they see everybody, including McMillan, get injured, and Ibuka has just been amazing. 5th in points per game. He's tied for second among wide receivers with 5 touchdowns. He's just been amazing. But he's going to be missing, and Godwin's going to be missing. They're going to need Mike Evans. They also might need Tez Johnson, who scored his first touchdown last week. He's got 7 targets over his last 2 games, does Mr. Tez. After he had just 1 target in each of his first 3 games, he missed, I believe it was week 2, he missed, altogether, didn't play altogether. But in the first 3 games he played, he only saw 1 target apiece. Last 2 weeks, 7 targets, scored a touchdown last week. Sterling Shepard, we've seen him have, flashes of fantasy relevance in the past. He's a solid player. He's one of those guys I much prefer on my real life football team than my fantasy team. But if you are looking for a desperation play this week, he might be it. Tampa Bay here, again, taking on Detroit. It's going to be a high over under 52.5. Detroit, as stingy as they are against opposing running backs, they give up a ton of points to the pass game. 4th most points to opposing wide receivers. So if Evans plays, keep an eye on that. You want to plug him in. You want to get him in there. If you're looking for a dart throw, if you maybe are missing Puka Nacua and you need, to throw somebody in there, or you're missing one of these other guys we've talked about, Harrison or whomever, if you want to take a dart throw with Tez Johnson, you want to take a dart throw with Sterling Shepard, hey, you've got, it's a late game. It's a Monday night game. It's the earlier of the 2 Monday night games. But so you're going to have to make an early call on that. But Detroit does give up a ton of points to that position if you are looking in that direction there. So let's move on to the New York Jets and Garrett Wilson, another guy here, wide receiver 7 overall on the season, another top 10 type who has been yanked out from underneath us like the tablecloth, leaving just the dishes, on top of the table there. He's dealing with a knee injury. He did not practice again today, and it sounds like he's going to miss a few weeks. What do you have for us on Garrett Wilson and what he's been dealing with?
Yeah, so they originally reported a hyperextension type of injury to the knee, which, when you hear that, it should send up some warning bells. That could sometimes cause ligament injury to the knee. We've seen that before.
Right.
Good news is he did have an MRI. He did avoid any major structural damage, but he is expected to miss some time. And my guess is that they're probably going to wait to bring him back until after their Week 9 bye. They're having a miserable season as it is. Why risk damaging one of your star players who has actually performed? So right. I think they're going to do that. They're going to put him out. And again, looking back at some of these other teams, I didn't mention it earlier, but the bye weeks really factor into this. Now that we're in the bye weeks, the Cardinals have a Week 8 bye, the Rams have a Week 8 bye, so that's going to factor in huge to the players that we've already talked about on those two teams. Cowboys have a bye coming up, and we'll hit on some of their guys. And then, like I said, the 49ers don't have a bye till Week 14. This is one of the last weeks that teams have bye still. So try get through that. It's tough. But I think we'll see Garrett Wilson once the Jets come back from that bye.
Yeah, I mean, 0-6. They've been close on a couple of games, but I mean, either way, it was nice. We were seeing, one thing we knew about Justin Fields when he came in is that he would find his guys and he would hyper target them and nail them to the wall in terms of their usage. And we've seen that with Garrett Wilson. We're starting to see some emergence of Mason Taylor here. Without Garrett Wilson, their pass game options are slim. Now Fields he's been good, but he's been good with Garrett Wilson to be able to throw to here. When the weeks that Justin Fields has been healthy, he's been a very good fantasy quarterback, as we knew he would be. But without Garrett Wilson in that lineup, I mean, you're looking at Allen Lazard, maybe Josh Reynolds if he's fully healthy. There's not a whole lot there to speak of in that wide receiver room anymore without Garrett Wilson. But then I mentioned Mason Taylor. I like Mason Taylor. He's been it looks like their rapport has been kind of growing. Their connection has been kind of growing here the last few weeks. Taylor he's ranked as tight end 16 overall this week. But if you're missing Garrett Wilson, which you're going to be this week, you might end up seeing Mason Taylor get a ton of targets. He might lead this team in targets. I wouldn't be shocked at all. So it makes me like Mason Taylor a lot more than that tight end 16 ranking. I also like Breece Hall this week. He's ranked running back 11 for this week. Again, if you don't have anything down the field, you're going to have to throw short. Well, you've got a lot worse people to throw too short than Breece Hall and Mason Taylor. So I think those are your pivots this week in that New York Jet offense. I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot to speak of in terms of wide receiver production. If you want to try Allen Lazard, you be my guest. I had high hopes for him, 2 years ago, but he has not really been able to do a whole heck of a lot there in Gotham. The Jets here facing, Carolina Panthers defense that has been really tough, actually, weirdly enough, or at least hasn't given up a ton of points to the wide receiver position. 28th most fantasy points in the league. So, I mean, right up near the top in terms of defending that wide receiver position in fantasy. So don't get your hopes up too much for anything going on there in New York for that pass game. So from Garrett Wilson to Calvin Ridley, dealing with a hamstring injury for the Tennessee Titans. We've spoken about a couple of disappointing dudes here so far today. Calvin Ridley, he's going to throw his hat in the ring to be right up there with one of the more disappointing guys on the slate. But Calvin Ridley's hamstring injury, what do you have for us on that?
Unclear as to how severe it is. I don't think he practiced earlier in the week. He may have gotten on the field limited Thursday, not certain, but most outlets are reporting that he's probably going to be doubtful, if not questionable at the most, weeks, in week 7. So it's not looking good. I'd probably go to the doubtful side more so than the questionable side myself, just given the nature of the injury and stuff. And again, one of those things you'll have to watch and see what he does in practice. If he can't get a full practice in, I wouldn't expect him to suit up. If he did carry a questionable tag into the weekend, then it's probably going to be a game time decision. And if he does suit up, we're probably going to see a very limited role.
Yeah, Tennessee facing the New England Patriots. Patriots have gone up the 11th most points to the wide receiver position. I mean, it's a good matchup in theory. But in practice, I mean, this Tennessee Titans team is in disarray. They just fired their head coach. They don't have a whole heck of a lot going on offensively there. Cam Ward has, I mean, I don't know that Cam Ward isn't going to be an NFL football player, but it's just this team has just been absolutely terrible so far. And, you know, you're talking about a guy in Calvin Ridley that you might have drafted him hoping he would be wide receiver 2 or 3 type for you, but he's wide receiver 53 overall right now on the season. Actually, Elik Ayomanor, Ayomanor, however you want to pronounce that. I liked the guy coming into the draft process. And when he went to Tennessee, we thought right away, okay, hey, he might have a role on this team. Well, sure enough, he seems to be the guy that has the rapport with Ward, such as that rapport is. And he's your wide receiver 41 on the week right now, ECR wise. So still a wide receiver 4 type, but giving you more than Ridley has, really, to be honest with you. In this game now against New England, insofar as you might want to use a wide receiver from the Tennessee Titans, even if Ridley plays, I think Ayomanor is he's the one to look at there. Also could be a game, you know, where Pollard and Spears, you'd like to think that if nothing else, they could dump some passes off there to the running backs there against New England. But New England has been tough against opposing running backs. They've only allowing the sixth fewest points to the opposing running backs there in that one. So I think it looks like another game where this Titans offense is probably going to struggle. They've been in disarray. As I said, they fired the coach Callahan. He had given up his play calling duties before that anyway. This team doesn't know if it's New York or Tuesday in terms of which end is up. So I hope you're not relying on anybody on that offense as it is to begin with. If you want to take a shot with somebody, maybe you take a shot with Elik there. Maybe you take a shot with Chigakonkwo, as New England gives up the 9th most points to opposing fantasy tight ends. But Chigakonkwo, again, a guy who kind of is that perpetual should be better than he is in fantasy and then never really kind of shows it for you until you bench him. And then once you bench him, he goes off and has that game. So Calvin Ridley and the Tennessee Titans, yeah, keep looking elsewhere, folks. But a little bit better news, maybe, hopefully a little bit better news. CeeDee Lamb and his high ankle sprain here. What do we got to talk about with CeeDee Lamb's high ankle sprain? Are we going to see him this week?
I kind of hope we do. I mean, they have a week 10 bye, so I don't know what they'd be waiting for. What are you going to throw him out there week 9 and then rest him? Like, what's the point then? You might as well wait till week 10, have your bye, and then bring him back week 11. So I don't know what they're doing with him. I know he's been doing some limited stuff during practices with him ramping up more and more each week. I think he's probably going to carry another questionable tag into the weekend, however, and I'm not so sure we're going to see him despite that. So I'm not really sure exactly what's going on with them. I was expecting him to be back by now, to be honest, because initially when he got hurt, he was actually saying, oh yeah, I could have come back. Like I could have played the rest of that game. He wanted to, and they kind of held him out. And then here we are several weeks later, and he's not yet been cleared to get back on the field and, not been on the injury report. So I'm not exactly sure what to make of that. High ankle sprains historically do take a lot longer to get better. You could theoretically take as long as 6 weeks in some cases. And that, could be what they're aiming for, but the timing of that doesn't really make much sense, like I said, given their bye week schedule and everything like that. So I'm not so sure. I think I think this is truly going to be day to day and week to week.
Yeah, well, they're facing the Commanders in this week, and this is the game that has the highest over-under, the highest point total on the weekend slate right now at 55 last I looked here. Washington was actually favored by 2, which means you would expect that Dallas is going to have to keep tossing the football. They're going to have to keep, firing away to try and match up here. CeeDee Lamb, I know he had the high profile drop, in the primetime game that everybody kind of seized on and looked at, but he had 24 targets through his first 2 games. He had 222 yards on 16 catches. He was doing CeeDee Lamb stuff before he got injured. And then since he's been out, I mean, George Pickens has just been all world in the 4 games, in the 4 weeks since then. You can't do a whole hell of a lot better than what George Pickens has given you. Washington, I said, gives up the 10th most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers. So I think both of them, if Lamb plays, I think Lamb makes a nice play in this game as well. Even if they do limit him a little bit, I agree with you. I don't know what the heck they would be waiting for. If you can run him out there, run him out there. You've got Pickens. You don't have to rely on Lamb. You've already seen that. However, they are. It looks like Jalen Tolbert might be dealing with an injury as well, so they may need to have him out there. Ryan Flournoy, another guy who is kind of an under the radar type play, but maybe fantasy relevant in this game if Lamb can't go. But if Lamb goes, you plug him in. You don't sit CeeDee Lamb because you know that he can go off at any point. He can score on any given touch. So let's keep an eye on that. Hopefully that he can go this weekend if he does. But even if he doesn't, hey, you want to play George Pickens in this game. You want to get your wide receivers in, your Dallas wide receivers in this Washington Dallas game, because it should be a shootout. So then, on the other side of the field in that same game, then Terry McLaurin been dealing with a quad. He's been dealing with hip flexors. He's been dealing with wanting to be traded. He's been dealing with holdouts. He's been dealing with everything else all flipping year. If it hasn't been one thing, it's been another thing for Scary Terry, and it continues to be scary with him. What's it looking like for Terry McLaurin? When are we going to see him back this week or when?
I don't think we're going to see him again. It's not looking good. He actually took a backwards turn, I think, because if I'm not mistaken, last week he was actually like doing some stuff at practice, and it looked like he might have been ramping up, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's out again. And now fast forward to Thursday, and he was a DNP, did not practice. So not quite sure what's going on with there. They didn't put him on IR, so it's not like they have to, activate him onto the roster again and make a roster move. Unclear as to exactly how serious the situation is, and whether or not it's the injury and the injury alone that's keeping him off the field, or some of these other matters that you mentioned. Yeah, right. Because with what we've seen out of him so far from the preseason and what's been going on during the season, who knows if it's a statement or if it's an actual injury or if he's hurt that bad. Who knows? And it's unfortunate because Terry McLaurin had a great season last year, and that team has the ability to go places and do some things, but they're going to need him. He's one of their top offensive weapons, and they're going to need him if they're going to do anything this season, I think. In the meantime, they're facing the Dallas Cowboys, who give up the most points in the pass game to their opponents. Number one in terms of points allowed to the quarterback position, number one in terms of points allowed to the the wide receiver position, which is where you would have Terry McLaurin. So if you have Deebo Samuel Sr., you want to plug him into your lineup. You should have been playing him all year anyway. You're talking about the wide receiver 8 overall on the season here, a guy who has been very efficient with the touches that he's gotten. He is running the ball just like we saw him, in San Francisco. He has 8 rushing attempts he's credited with on the season and a touchdown there. He's got 34 catches on 43 targets this season and another 3 touchdowns receiving. He has given you what you want from Deebo Samuel. He looks a little bit rejuvenated after he was a little bit soft and maybe punky looking last season in San Francisco. You want to get Deebo Samuel in your lineup. In terms of anybody else that you might want to play, Moore had a touchdown last week, and Luke McCaffrey had a touchdown last week, and they make dart throw plays, but only because of the matchup. I'm not going to put any kind of faith in either one of those two guys, in anybody except Deebo Samuel in this offense if McLaurin doesn't play. I like Zach Ertz. I think they like Zach Ertz. Dallas is so versus opposing, tight ends. If McLaurin's out again, they may have to go at Zach Ertz a little bit more. So if you want to take a shot at anybody outside of Deebo in this offense, in terms of passing wise, I'd probably lean Ertz over trying to gamble on either, Moore or McCaffrey there. So then let's talk about those 49ers that we kind of joked around about how it seems like we're either talking about, the 49ers or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jawan Jennings, rib, ankle, shoulder, mindset, everything else. He's been dealing with all kinds of issues. Jawan Jennings has been. Ricky Pearsall
dealing with a knee issue. What do you got for both of those guys here? What are we going to see in this wide receiver room for the 49ers this week?
Well, of all those guys, those two, I also want to mention here that, Brandon Ayuk is due back any week here. He's still on the physically unable to perform list. And there were some rumors going around that they hadn't seen him at the practice facility in a while. And rumors going around that
speaking of head cases, by the way,
that he wanted to be traded or something. Well, it turns out he's at the practice facility. He's been practicing, and he was out there actually today, and he's continuing to show progress. Still not removed from the PUP list, but working towards it. Meanwhile, Ricky Pearsall hasn't really made much progress. He, I think, attempted maybe to do some stuff at practice, but then shut it down, which wasn't necessarily a big surprise. He's dealing with a bone bruise issue and a PCL sprain, I think, or something like that. Whatever he's got, they're not going to rush him back. Juwan Jennings has been playing hurt pretty much all season, it sounds like. He's apparently had 5 broken ribs for some time now, bilateral high ankle sprains, and some shoulder issue that dates back to like the preseason and even, I think, into the offseason. So of all those guys, though, I think Juwan Jennings probably has the best chance to get back in the action. He was actually been doing some limited practice sessions throughout the week and is slowly working his way back. I think at this point, like, how could you not get him out there? And I think the only reason maybe you don't push him along even more than they already have is because, and I'm going to kind of skip ahead here, but we will see George Kittle back this week, almost guaranteed. He's been doing limited practices. He's in that 21-day window. Originally, he was actually ready to come off that onto that 21-day window last week, but they had said we're going to shoot for week 7, and that's been the plan, and they're sticking to it. And he's been out there. I expect that this could be the week we see him back. And if that's the case, then we're not rushing Pearsall back. We're not rushing Brandon Ayuk back, and maybe we'll see Juwan Jennings.
From your mouth to whatever deity you believe in's ears. Yeah. Hopefully we see George Kittle back this week. That would be amazing. I mean, Atlanta, and this is a tough matchup offensively in terms of a fantasy matchup for anybody here. 49ers hosting Atlanta, but Atlanta has given up, they are 28th in points allowed to the quarterback position, 31 in points allowed to the running back position, 27 in points allowed to the wide receiver position, last in points allowed to the tight end position. Atlanta has been a tough score in fantasy if you've been facing them. Then you talk about the fact that everyone who has ever played quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers is dealing with some sort of injury right now. Everyone that is currently on their roster who is listed as a wide receiver seems like is dealing with something. When Christian McCaffrey has been kind of the picture of health on your football team, you know that it's been a rough year. It's been a bad season. But with the wide receivers, at least let's break them down first. I agree with you. Pearsall probably not going to play. It's unfortunate because he looks like he can be one of the more dynamic players on that team if and when he's healthy. Brandon Ayuk, who the hell knows? He's due to come back soon, but we really don't know what we're going to see out of him because we haven't seen him for most of the last 2 years, in fact. And then, with Juwan Jennings, he's hurt. Even if he's healthy-ish or healthy enough to get on the field, I just said it's a really tough matchup there. So then you're talking about Kendrick Bourne, and Kendrick Bourne has really been the guy for them in terms of their wide receiver position here. I mean, he hasn't scored a touchdown yet on the season, but he has been about the only guy who's been able to be out there and be any kind of consistent. He's got 142 yards receiving in both of the last 2 weeks. Now, in week 5, he did that on 10 catches. Last week, he did it on half as many catches. He was getting downfield and got free and ran like the wind all over the place against the Buccaneers last weekend. But, outside of Kendrick Bourne, there's not a whole lot to talk about there for that wide receiver court. Now, I just said Atlanta, 32nd in the league in terms of points allowed to the tight end position. They allow the fewest points to tight ends. But if George Kittle can come back, I'm glad you brought him up early because I think it fits with this conversation. You want to roll George Kittle out there. In his absence, they have continued to throw to that tight end position. Jake Tongas, who, I don't think any of us would have known what his flipping name was before the George Kittle injury, has, 3 touchdowns on the season so far. He's in the last 3-4 weeks. He has seen 28, 33, 30, 36 targets in the last 4 weeks, 41 in the last 5 weeks. He caught 6 or 7 balls last week for 58 yards. I mean, he's actually been a very reliable guy for them at that tight end position, and he's been a red zone target for them as well. But there's just nobody that can compare to George Kittle if and when he can get on the field there. So I think that's your hope this week facing that Atlanta Falcons offense, is that you can get George Kittle back out there. If Jennings plays, you want to take a dart throw on him, go ahead. But honestly, for my money this week, it's McCaffrey. And if Kittle plays, you want to play Kittle. And other than that, I kind of want to leave this offense alone, at least for another week. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on those guys, but I mean, it's been such a rough year for this 49er team injury wise, that especially in a tough matchup like this, I'm leaving them alone.
I think we do see Kittle back. I just don't know if you're going to see Kittle at his peak just yet. It's going to take him a couple weeks to kind of get back to where he needs to be, but he should be on the field this week.
Right. All right. So then, moving from there real quick, let's talk about Quentin Johnston. Been dealing with a hamstring injury. It's kind of a cluster, in that Chargers wide receiver room in terms of guessing who's going to be the fantasy star every week. But what's Quentin Johnston look like this week?
Again, another hamstring injury. Unfortunately, he was looking pretty good early in the season, and it looked like we were going to get the best out of him yet, which, maybe a breakout year, and then all of a sudden he pops up unexpectedly with this. I don't know if we're going to see him. Did he even practice yet? I don't even know.
I didn't see if he practiced or not yet this week.
Man, these are so tough to call. Again, we don't know the severity. There's been not as much information out there on what is going on with him, at least to what degree. Unless he's practicing in full, we may not see him. He'll probably carry a questionable tag at the very least. I know he did heading into last weekend. Yeah. I think that's going to stick around with him for at least this week as well. Your guess is as good as mine, Chase, on this one.
They are facing an Indianapolis Colts team that gives up the 5th most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers, but they are a late Sunday afternoon game. I said on the show last night, I like Ladd McConkey this week. I love Ladd McConkey this week if Quentin Johnston doesn't play. If Quentin plays, all bets are off on who scores from the wide receiver position in that wide receiver core, because they have thrown to all 3 of those guys, Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and Quentin Johnston. I do think that, when Quentin Johnston plays, he is not going away, folks. I called that early in the season. I liked the idea of Quentin Johnston. I think he showed us last season that he can be an actual weapon on an NFL team. He's not going to ever be the most consistent guy, but if he does not play, keep an eye on that, because if he doesn't play, I think it's Ladd McConkey to the moon in this game. I really like Ladd. If there's no Quentin Johnston, if QJ plays, go ahead and take a dart throw at any single one of those guys. Your guess is as good as mine on who scores, but they're all worth it with a good matchup here against the Indianapolis
So it
Colts.
looks like he actually did get a full practice in today, Quentin Johnston.
Excellent. Okay, well,
that was after being limited earlier in the week. So
we may end up seeing him.
In the right direction.
Again, if he plays and when he plays, your guess is as good as mine on who scores.
Today being Thursday, by the way, we record on Thursday.
There's still 2-3 more days, 2-3 more days yet, 2.5 days yet.
There you go. Yeah.
So Darnell Mooney, the second wide receiver there down in Atlanta, hamstring injury, did not practice midweek. What are we looking at for Darnell Mooney?
Well, so it looked like last week he was actually going to be making his way back. I think he actually got on the practice field and was limited, and then all of a sudden they pulled the rug out from under me, because I have him on a couple of rosters as kind of a wide receiver 4, but he was limited yesterday. Let's see, did he do anything today? I don't know. Again, not looking good though. If he again can't get out there and at least get a full session in like Johnston was able to do today, I feel more confident that he's going to be ready to go than Mooney at this point. He was dealing with like a shoulder issue, I think, earlier in the year too. I mean, it seems like it's been one thing after another with him this season, unfortunately. So he hasn't really had any productive multiple weeks out on the field. And so it's been hard to kind of really gauge where he's at. Again, if he can get a full session in before the end of the week, maybe we'll see him this week. As of right now, though, I don't think he has. We'll have to kind of follow up with this and see.
Yeah, it's been a frustrating situation because we know that Darnell Mooney, when he's out there, he's a very nice number 2 on an offense and in a fantasy offense as well. A little bit tougher matchup here with the 49ers this week. It's not a great matchup for them anyway. Michael Penix Jr. has been kind of hit or miss in terms of whether he actually produces or not. It looks like another week to me of, you want to rely on Drake London and you might want to take a dart throw with Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts has kind of been, will he, won't he? But I'm not going to rely on Darnell Mooney, even if he does end up playing. I'm not excited about starting him this week. Let's move on. We had a couple other guys. I mean, Josh Downs is dealing with a concussion here. Didn't practice this week. He's got a questionable status. Jalen Coker has been on injured reserve. He can't play until he's cleared from IR. Christian Watson for my Packers has been out for a while. We don't know he might be coming back soon, but let's move on to the tight end position real quick. We talked about George Kittle earlier. We've got 2 other big names I want to mention real quick or talk about real quick. Brock Bowers for the Las Vegas Raiders there, dealing with that knee injury. That's been a frustrating situation. He was drafted, with high hopes this season. What's it look like with Brock Bowers right now?
I don't think we're going to see him back anytime soon. I think the Raiders have a week 10 bye, if I'm not mistaken. So I really think they're going to hold him out until then. Again, he's got a bone bruise. He's got a PCL sprain and a bone bruise, a very bad combination of injury to have. Yeah. Not because of the severity and the fact that the treatment necessary for it. It's just the fact that these things take time to heal and you need time for that bone bruise to go away before you can really start to do anything. So that's the downside, is that bone bruise is actually more concerning than anything, because if they let him go back too soon and that hasn't completely healed, that'll set him back a long time. So you have to wait for that to resolve before you can really start to do anything on it. Even like rehab stuff, like you're limited with what you can do with the bone bruise. The PCL, that ligament is not as important for overall knee stability, so that's not usually surgically treated, which is good news. Guys play with that sprained or injured all the time and can actually sometimes play through it within a week or two. But the bone bruise here is what's really holding them back. And so that's, I think, again, if I'm not mistaken, I think they have a week 10 bye. I think we're going to probably not see him until after that.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, he was taken as a top 2 tight end overall, and people had a lot of high hopes for him, and he was so outstanding last season. Now this week, facing up the divisional matchup here against the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are tough on opposing tight ends. They've given up the 27th most points, I believe. Yeah, 27th most points to the opposing tight end position here in fantasy football. So if, even though Michael Mayer is coming off of his best career fantasy game from last week and had the kind of game that we all kind of hoped for when we drafted him 3 years ago in Dynasty, I'm not overly excited about his prospects this week either. So, I'm going to tell you to look elsewhere in terms of your tight end needs this weekend if you're still missing Brock Bowers there. And so then we talked about George Kittle. Let's talk about David Njoku, who's been dealing with a knee injury. He didn't practice, yesterday or today, and kind of popped up last week with this knee issue. What's David Njoku dealing with, and what does it look like in terms of when we might see him?
We're not exactly sure what the original injury was. It sounds like it might be a mild sprain or something of some kind. But like you said, out of practice this week so far, doubtful for week 7. I don't think we're going to see him. And that's unfortunate. We'll have to keep an eye. He's been having a decent year. Of course, the 1 year I don't have him on my roster.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't think we're going to see Njoku. But I just wanted to backtrack real quick. I know we skipped over them kind of quick, but Josh Downs apparently had a concussion come out of nowhere after he completed the game this past weekend and played well. They're not sure where it happened, whether it was at the end of the game or during practice. He's been out. Questionable heading into the weekend. It's going to be hard for him to clear without getting a full session in. Possible, but less likely to happen.
One of the few Colts that didn't get injured in pregame warmups last week.
Correct. So, yeah. Correct. Jalen Coker, he's actually been working his way back steadily, and it sounds like we actually are going to see him. He's been practicing, got a full session in, I think, this week, and has looked good according to coaches and has felt good. I think we see him actually come off IR activated for this weekend. And then Christian Watson, not hopeful we're going to see him anytime soon. Dealing with this ACL injury that he suffered last year, working his way back. Had hamstring issues prior to that kept him out for a long time last year and the year before, I think. He's been doing some limited work at practice, but I think he's still a few weeks out.
All right. Well, yeah. Revisiting the David Njoku thing for 2 seconds. I mean, hey, listen, this is a guy who literally burned his face pretty much off and played the following week. So if David Njoku is sitting out, you know that the injury is not something that you can play through. But in his stead here, Miami, their matchup this week for the Browns, Miami gives up the 6th most points to opposing fantasy tight ends. Harold Fannin Jr. has been a thing all year. I think Harold Fannin Jr. is going to continue to be a thing, not just this year, but I like him going forward in his career. I think Harold Fannin Jr. is one that if you didn't draft him in Dynasty, you want to try and get a hold of him in Dynasty, because he has the look of one of those guys who is going to be named a tight end, but is going to be used all over the place. I like that idea. He's athletic. He catches the ball well. He had a ton of production in college, and he has continued that right into, what has been otherwise kind of a disappointing year in Cleveland. So Harold Fannin Jr. this week, he's ranked as tight end 9 overall. I say fire him up everywhere you've got him. If you want to pick him up because you're missing one of these other guys that we've talked about injury wise, hey, feel pretty confident in what you're going to get out of Harold Fannin Jr. for this coming weekend. But I think that's going to do it for us then for the injuries talk this week. Brian, I want to thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise with us, with all of our viewers and our listeners. Remind everyone out there where they can find you and what you got coming up here.
Yeah, so I'm most active on X at Injured List Pod. Sometimes you'll see me drop some stuff on there throughout the day, even though I'm kind of busy running around with work and everything and kids and fam. But usually I try to do updates on X at Injured List Pod. And then obviously with Dan and Chase and the rest of the crew at Operation Domination, every Thursday we record. He puts that episode out on Friday. Some very in-depth injury updates. I do my own podcast. I've been doing my own episode injury updates early in the week. It's basically early predictions, early assessments from coming off the weekend, usually after that Monday Night Football game. And I usually release that podcast episode on Tuesday. And you can find that at theinjuredlist.com. You can find that at That Sports Podcast Network on our YouTube channel and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And then TSS Fantasy, I do shows with them Friday night and Sunday early morning for last-minute injury stuff.
Love the dudes over at TSS. Good friends of mine from back in the day. Some of the original friends I made in this business when I started doing this years ago. So, all right. Yeah. Hey, that's a good idea there to check that out on like he said early in the week, if you want to get a kind of a jump on the injury slate there and figure out, make your early predictions in terms of what you need for your waiver wire. But thank you again for coming on, and thank all of you out there for catching another edition of the Injury Report here on Operation Domination. Dan should be back next week. In the meantime, make sure you're downloading Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. You can check out all of our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. Reminder, you can catch Adam LaRue tomorrow with the best betting advice for NFL Week 7 as he and Chaz Filardi get you set to hopefully win some money this weekend as you dominate the fantasy football slate. I'm Chase Thornton. Thanks for being here. Again, another thank you to our guest, Dr. Brian Scott, and we will see you around. Cheers, Slàinte mhath.